Good evening, Hanover Republican. Folks, it is great to be here with you this evening. I am going to hold on to the microphone to make sure everybody can hear me. Thank you so much for coming out. Let's give our Hanover Republican Party and all the folks that have organized this evening another round of applause. Well, folks, it's an honor to be here with you. Obviously, it's been a very eventful week in Washington. In fact, I had to come back home one evening to go get another pair of asbestos underwear, but I can tell you that everything is back in order. But I think a good week. The things that we have done to get us on the path to repeal and replace Obamacare, I think is the right direction for this country, and I think a significant accomplishment for this president. And the good news is, folks, I think we got the bill that we had before us yesterday to pass because we said that the original bill was not what we needed as a nation. So we held out. We were able to get a better bill, actually make sure we got the things done. And we set aside, did away with the individual mandate, did away with the employer mandate. Exactly. Did away with every single one of the taxes in Obamacare. We also put power back in the hands of the state to determine what should an insurance policy be. How do we make sure we're bringing down costs? How do we make sure that consumers have choice? Taking away the penalty. So if you don't purchase insurance, that's your decision. It's not the government's decision. The government doesn't tell you what to buy in health insurance. Folks, it is not perfect, but I can tell you it is a quantum leap forward over what we have today with Obamacare, and it's the pathway to get rid of Obamacare, for it to be gone forever. I am very happy with where we are. We still have a ways to go, but this is a great first step, and it shows that we as Republicans can govern based on good, sound, conservative principles that we know work. That's great news. Another thing, too, folks, is, thank you. Another thing, too, is, you know, we had a big debate this week, too, about this nation's finances, about what we did to finish out the year. And first of all, I hate these continuing resolutions. Folks, if you were to come up with a way not to run a business and not to run a government, you know what you'd come up with? A continuing resolution, because you don't make the tough decisions about what needs to happen. I did not like the omnibus budget bill. While we need to pass those appropriations bills, this omnibus bill, I don't think did the things it needed to do. In fact, there are a lot of things in there that never saw the light of day. There are actually 24 items in that bill, folks, that never found their way into an appropriations bill, all of a sudden appeared in this final bill. Now, we as Republicans said that we wouldn't do that. We have to do better than that. So I want to make sure that we learn from this experience and make sure we do a better job in getting this information together on how we do appropriations. And folks, the bottom line is this, is we better start doing things on time, getting our job done on time. Exactly. And I think this, that if a budget isn't adopted by April 15th, there shouldn't be a single member of Congress that gets a paycheck. Pay for performance. No budget, no pay. I have a bill that'll do that. Secondly is this crazy tradition of leaving Washington for 5 weeks in August called August recess. Folks, it's an artifact of the past. It's an artifact of the days when members of Congress were farmers. And of 535 members today, folks, at the widest definition, only 12 are farmers. It goes back to the days of horse and buggy and no air conditioning. Well, we got plenty of air conditioning, plenty of jet aircraft. If all 12 appropriations bills are not done by the end of July, Congress needs to stay in Washington until the job gets done, period. And because I know things are running late this year, I've asked the Speaker, I said, you know, you want to really lead? Make sure Washington stays in session. Make sure Congress stays in session there in Washington in August until the job gets done. You want to see appropriations bills get done? Keep members in Washington during August. Things will definitely get done then. Folks, we've got a great opportunity too. Our next step is going to be to address the 2018 budget, which is late. But what will be part of that is tax reform. And we need to do tax reform. We need to reduce the corporate tax rate, reduce the individual tax rate, simplify the tax code, You see what happened today with the employment numbers. You see what happened today with the stock market. They expect Congress to get tax reform done. We have to get it done. It is critical for our nation, critical for our economy. Think about the things that we could do, folks. We are right now just a little bit above 1% annual GDP growth. We have so much more potential. We can easily get up to 3%. And think about what this nation would be with just 3% GDP growth. And we can do that on the path we're on by getting rid of these regulations as we've been doing, but also making sure we have a tax code that rewards companies for doing business here in the United States, rewards companies for growing jobs, rewards individuals for earning money, for working harder. That's a tax code that we all know we can believe in and that we have to do going forward. So I look forward to getting tax reform done. I think getting this bill through the House sets the groundwork for us to be very successful, I think, in the months to come to make sure we get tax reform done. So I am very optimistic with where we are, the things that are being done in Washington. It's not perfect, but I can tell you one thing: we'll continue to work each and every day to make sure that good, common sense, conservative principles are there with what needs to happen in our government. And folks, we are very honored tonight to have a special guest who has worked for years to do just that, has been a leader from every level in the private sector to being very passionate about what needs to happen with our government. She started as a secretary, and she worked her way up to be a leader in a Fortune 50 company. That's one of the top 50 companies in the United States. From AT&T and Lucent Technologies, where she worked her way up there as a leader, to working her way up to be the CEO of Hewlett-Packard, one of the largest companies in the United States. She had the passion to work hard, to use the principles of our free enterprise system to make not only her life better, but also to make our nation better, to build our business community, and took that passion and said, you know what? I've got a vision about what needs to happen in this nation. We need a nation where government gets out of the way, where it empowers and engages people. It engages folks where they can stand up against the political establishment, so the power goes back to, as our founding fathers had in mind, in the hands of the people, which is what our republic is based upon. Every moment of the day, folks, she was out there as an advocate to make sure government got out of the way. We empowered individuals. We made sure that what made our nation great is indeed what drives us. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Carly Fiorina.
And I want to begin by setting the record straight on something that many of you asked me. I'm not a Californian, I'm a Virginian. My grandmother was a Virginian. I was not born in Virginia, I was born in Texas. But I remember my grandmother moved from Virginia to Texas when she was married. And I remember sitting on her back porch in Texas in August, and her talking longingly about Virginia, the rivers, the mountains, the green trees. You know, in Texas there aren't a lot of rivers, there aren't a lot of mountains, there isn't a lot of green, and so I grew up hearing about Virginia. When I got out of the secretarial pool, I did indeed start my business career as a secretary, working for a little 9-person real estate firm. And when I finally went off, thanks to the encouragement of 2 men who worked in that firm, and got my MBA, my very first job was in downtown Washington, D.C., working for AT&T. That is where I met my husband, Frank, 35 years ago. We met and married in Virginia. We bought our first home in Virginia. We raised our daughters in Virginia. Our granddaughters are in Virginia. So 6 years ago, after 12 years in the crazy land of California, we moved back home to Virginia, and we're happy. You know, I have to say, one of the things that I learned running for president is that most people aren't political. You all are. You're very politically active, or you wouldn't be here tonight, but most people actually aren't. That doesn't mean they don't vote or they aren't informed, but politics isn't their life. They're just trying to do the best they can every day. And I think that matters, because I think a lot of people form their opinions about what they think about politicians or the direction of the nation, not from watching political shows all day long, but from everyday life. That's how I formed my political opinions. I was reminded of this when I was in Williamsburg recently. You know, we spend a lot of time talking about how exceptional our nation is, and our nation is indeed exceptional. I have lived and traveled and worked all over the world, and there is no other nation like the United States, but sometimes I think we forget why we're so exceptional. One of the reasons we're exceptional is because if you think about history, most nations are formed on ethnicity, or tribes, or territory, or conquest. This is the only nation in the history of the world founded on ideas.
Yes.
Ideas that were debated vigorously right here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I grew up in a conservative family. My dad was a law professor, a conservative, and so I listened to him talk about conservative principles, but honestly, I didn't really understand them until I went to work and grew up and lived life. And here are the things that I have learned along the way, that I believe the vast majority of people also agree with, whether they know they're Republicans or not. And this is, I believe, our great opportunity. Because we have won now so many important elections. We have a very important set of elections here in 2017 that we cannot forget about. But when we win elections, we have to build support and persuade. Politics is sometimes like sports, you know, who's up, who's down, you're on my team, you're against my team. But in the end, I think we have to persuade people based on the power of our ideas. I want to talk to you about 3 things I've learned in the course of my life. And these 3 things I think are the core of what we believe as Americans and as Republicans. First thing I learned along the way is that everybody has more potential than they realize. Everybody. My mother told me when I was a little girl, what you are is God's gift to you, what you make of yourself is your gift to God. I didn't feel very gifted as a little girl or as a young woman. Everybody seemed smarter, prettier, better than me. But when I was that secretary all those many years ago, 2 men came to my desk one day and said, you know, we've been watching you, and we think you could do more than type and file. Do you want to know what we do? They introduced me to business. But they did something far more profound. They saw possibilities in me. They saw potential in me. And because they saw potential in me, I saw possibilities in myself that I didn't know were there. I've had the opportunity to work with so many people. And what I can tell you is that everyone has more potential than they realize. I could tell you a million stories. I could tell you about a guy named Jim, an engineer, who nobody paid any attention to, but one day in a conversation with him, he gives me an idea, he has an idea, and he saves our company $300 million. I could tell you about a single mom with a couple kids struggling to make it in AT&T who turned out, because she had an inner strength, based on all those hurdles and barriers she had to overcome, she turned out to be an incredible negotiator. And so I made her a lead negotiator. I could tell you about people all over the world who have the potential and who have executed against a vision they had to lift themselves and their families out of poverty. Everyone has more potential than they realize. All of us are filled with God-given gifts and possibilities. That's one thing that I have learned along the way. I'll tell you another thing I've learned along the way. People can solve the problems that impact them. They're not always given a chance. Sometimes people ask me, how'd you go from being a secretary to being a CEO? I didn't have any ambition to become a CEO. Remember, I was a secretary. I had majored in medieval philosophy, for heaven's sakes. I dropped out of law school. I mean, this is not a glittering resume. But everywhere I went, I found problems that had been left to fester And everywhere I went, I asked people about those problems, and I discovered that they understood the problems. And they actually understood what would help solve the problems. It's just most of the time nobody ever asked them, or nobody listened to them. And so I asked, and I listened. People can solve the problems that impact them. In fact, they are best able to solve the problems that impact them because they understand them. Of course, they need support. They need tools. They need opportunity. They need somebody to hear them. But people can solve the problems that impact them. That's the second thing I've learned. The third thing I've learned is that if you concentrate, if you collect too much money, too much power, too much decision-making in too few people's hands for too long, the money will be wasted, the power will be abused, and the decisions will be wrong.
Amen.
Power concentrated. And so I spent a lot of time in my business career and the time I've spent in nonprofits, even in the work that I've done in policy throughout government agencies, I've spent a lot of time working on those three principles. Everybody has more potential than they realize. You have to give people the opportunity to live up to their potential. People can solve problems that impact them because they understand those problems. You need to give them the tools and the resources and the leadership to do so. And power concentrated is power abused, so we need to disperse power. Now, when you think about it, those are things I learned from life. But they are also the core of this nation. They are the core of what our founders believed. When our founders talked about inalienable rights, basically what they were saying is people are not defined by their circumstances. We've had to work hard to make sure that those ideals of inalienable rights and limitless human potential apply to everyone. But this is a nation founded on the idea that you are not determined. Your future is not defined by what you look like, or how you start, or what your circumstances are, or even what your opinion is. This nation was founded on the idea that our future, each of our futures, is determined by our own God-given gifts and our choices. And that each of us have the right to find and use our God-given gifts and fulfill our potential. This nation was also founded on the idea that problems get solved best locally, not by some faraway expert who doesn't really understand what they're doing. And certainly our nation was founded on the idea that power concentrated is power abused. The Constitution talks a lot about people's potential and preserving people's right to fulfill their potential. But it also talks a lot about how to constrain the concentration of power. And the Constitution, properly read, is all about the constraint of power. Somebody asked me recently, what do you look for in leaders? What do you look for in leaders? I'll tell you something I've learned about leaders. I think there's a lot of confusion about what that term means. I think people hear the term leader and they think president or CEO, somebody, in other words, with a position or power or title. And what I've learned is that leadership has nothing to do with those things. You know that too. You know there are people with big titles and big offices who don't lead. And you know there are also people who don't have any title at all, and they lead every day. Leaders, in other words, solve problems. Leaders serve others. Leaders, most especially, unlock potential in others. And so if leadership is not about power and title and position, what is it about? I was asked. I think leadership requires courage. Because to solve problems, you have to do what? You have to challenge the status quo. And the status quo is powerful, always. And if you're going to challenge the status quo, if you're going to drain the swamp, if you're going to take on the powers that be, what do you have to have? You got to have courage. Why? Because anytime you challenge the status quo, you're going to get what? criticized, booed. Exactly. So a leader needs courage. A leader needs character. It is character that tells a leader in a really tough time what's the right thing to do, rather than simply the expedient thing to do. What is the thing that will create the most good for the most people, not just the good for myself? And by the way, all the data in the world tells us that 80% of the American people have concluded that the federal government is incompetent and corrupt. And 80% of the American people also say that too many politicians care about themselves, not about getting the people's work done. So character matters. A leader has to be a collaborator. A leader can't be one of these people who says it's all about me. A leader has to be willing to work with others to get something bigger than themselves done. But I think the most important quality of a leader, and it is the thing that I think distinguishes our nation more than anything else, a leader sees possibilities. There are two kinds of people in the world, and you know this. There are people who look at a set of circumstances and see only constraints. They look at a set of circumstances, maybe it's a new job, maybe it's a problem here in the community, and they say, I can't do this, they won't let me do that. Wow, we'll never solve that problem. And then there are other people who look at exactly the same set of circumstances and see possibilities. But we could do this. We could make progress here. Leaders see possibilities. And they seize those possibilities. They solve problems by unlocking potential in others, by recognizing that people do have the capacity and the desire to solve the problems that impact them, and remembering always not to hold too much power in too few hands for too long. That's what I've learned in life. That's what I think most people learn in the course of their lives. And so in addition to having a very important election here in the Commonwealth in 2017, in addition to have achieved a great victory and have majorities in the House and the Senate and a Republican in the White House, I think the truth is the vast majority of Americans are Republicans, they just don't know it yet. And so it's our opportunity to persuade. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the only nation on earth that was founded on the principle that we are not defined by what we look like, who we are, how we start, or our circumstances. This is the only nation on earth founded on the principle that people should solve and can solve the problems that impact them. This is the only nation on the face of the earth founded on the principle that power concentrated is power abused. And so power has to be dispersed and released along with money and decision making. But most importantly of all, I believe this nation is exceptional because we as Americans always see possibilities. As a nation, we have never been afraid to challenge the status quo. We have never been afraid to tackle festering problems. And most of all, because we look into the world, we look into our communities, we look around our great nation, and we see possibilities. Ladies and gentlemen, we have incredible possibilities in front of us. And every single one of you is a leader in this community. You may not have position, you may not have title, you may not be famous, but you are leaders. If you're focused on solving problems, if you're focused on lifting others up, if you see possibilities instead of constraints, and if you know that it's not all about you, it's about others, you are leading. This nation, this community, this county, and our Commonwealth will continue to be great because of leaders like you. Thank you so very much, and thanks for having me. questions. I have a very long drive ahead of me and had a really long drive to get here, so we'll keep it only to a few, but I'm happy to take a couple questions. Please don't ask me if I'm going to run for the Senate. I haven't decided yet. Yes, sir.
What's the future for Ms. Trump?
Okay, well, that's a slightly more diplomatic way of asking. I will stay politically active and engaged because I think it is our duty as citizens to do so, and so I will certainly do so. I have been asked by many of you, will I run for the Senate in Virginia, and you've been very encouraging. I so appreciate that, and the truth is I don't know. And it's a little too soon to make that decision because I, like everyone else, want to really stay focused on the 2017 elections and make sure we get the right things done in 2017. But don't worry, I'm not disappearing.
I'll ask a question.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chairman.
Thank you. So the question that I would pose to you is, being a woman of your stature and what you've achieved, and both politically and professionally, what advice would you have for the young women of America in terms of thinking ahead and looking at what their possibilities are? So, realistically, in some ways it is still different for women, let's face it. I mean, it was a different time, but my first business meeting with clients was held in a strip club. That was embarrassing. And yet, despite the fact that women sometimes face different hurdles, it is also true that this generation of women is the most empowered, the most educated, the most liberated generation of women in all of human history. What I would say is this: do not let others define you. Do not let others tell you what to believe. By the way, Democrats love to do that. Progressives love to say, women have to believe this. My candidacy for the presidency was called Offensive to Women because I am pro-life. Feminism is not about you gotta believe the long litany of progressive causes. Feminism is about each woman having the opportunity to live the life she chooses, just as we hope every man has that same opportunity. So don't let others define you. Don't let others choose your path, choose your own. All of us, men and women, will meet people who will tear us down, and we will meet people who lift us up. Stick with the people who lift you up.
Amen.
And don't let the people who tear you down get you. Yes, ma'am. And then I'll come to you, sir, and then I'll be done. Yes, ma'am.
How did you feel being the only woman on the stage with all those guys that get us?
How did I feel being the only woman on that stage with all those guys? Actually, it's sort of the story of my life. So, I mean, I've spent most of my business career, I entered very male-dominated fields, communications, technology. Most of the time, I was the only woman in the room. So honestly, I thought it was somewhat of an advantage. I think they were more nervous than I was. Yes, sir.
Have you and Donald Trump made up?
I'm not sure we were ever fighting. And yes, we've certainly made up. We've had a nice meeting. I was asked that, it's interesting, I was giving a television interview earlier today, and I was asked, well, he said all these horrible things. I said, first of all, I didn't take them personally. I said, I'll tell you what I did take personally. I took far more personally when someone says I'm offensive to women because I'm pro-life. That's an insult. That's an insult. I think the media has such a short memory. So in the course of that interview, I said, when Nancy Pelosi calls Tea Partiers racist, that's an insult.
Yes.
When President Obama says that someone who doesn't support the Iranian nuclear deal is as bad as the hardliners in Tehran shouting death to America, that's an insult. Donald Trump didn't invent political insults. The Democrats have been using personal insults for a long time because their policies don't work.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
This is more or less a thank you. Thank you for portraying women not as victims, but as equals in this last election. So thank you for this.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for lifting me up tonight and enjoy the rest of the
You know, we hear a lot these days about what's happening in Washington, and certainly that's important. But let me tell you what's even more important. What we have before us here in 2017, and that is to make sure that we take back the governor's mansion, that we take back the lieutenant governor, that we take back the attorney general. Because we've seen what's happened there. We have our House of Delegates races, folks. That is ground zero. Ground zero will be Virginia this year. That's where all eyes are going to be focused. We want to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure we win those elections, because that will send a signal across the United States that indeed what Republicans stand for and our principles work. And they work here in Virginia, a state that they say is purple. Folks, this state isn't purple. Just as Carly said, most folks are Republicans, they just don't know it. All we have to do is to work hard to make sure we remind them that they indeed are Republicans. We get our folks out to vote. We will win this election, folks. So thank you so much for all your support tonight. Great, great event. Make sure in the weeks and months to come that all of us are on the same page to make sure that we win these statewide races. We maintain our House of Delegates seats. Everyone in this room, please help us. We will win. We will be victorious this November. Folks, thanks again. May God bless you. May God bless our great Commonwealth of Virginia. And may God bless our United States of America.